How many of you think you're good at multitasking? I used to think this until I started doing research. I love this quote. Multitasking is merely the opportunity to screw up more than one thing at a time. That's a great quote. This is really fascinating research from Stanford University. People who think they're good at multitasking generally have a lower capacity for simultaneous thought. So the people who think they're good at it are actually the worst at it. And they found that these digital multitaskers, they called them suckers for irrelevancy, that their critical thinking went offline. They didn't look at information as critically. They were worse at filtering out irrelevancy. They were worse at organizing their memories. And they were worse at switching back and forth between tasks, even when they weren't task switching. They just lost the ability to organize their thoughts and think clearly and critically. That's really, really concerning. This piece of information will come back later in the research here. The long-term consequence they found is that it actually changes the gray matter in our brain. And we tend to lose gray matter in the part of our brain associated with motivation to get to that goal, that end goal we set for ourselves, and in regulating our thoughts and emotions. Our brain changes as a result of trying to multitask, and it changes in negative ways. Greater focus on one end goal at a time is better for our brains. Remember earlier I said, what is the difference between distraction and addiction? I really like this researcher's model. He basically said, look at whether it's harmful for you and whether you can stop using it. If it's harmful for you and you can't stop using it, that's when you fall into the addiction trap. If it's harmful to you and you can stop using it, it's just a distraction. Become more mindful, become more aware, and make changes so that you're less distracted. If it's not harmful for you and you can't stop using it, well, it's just a necessity and you deal with it and you put management practices into place to deal with it. If it's not harmful to you and you can stop using it, well, good, it's not a problem at all. The real problem is when it's harmful to you, which we've shown it changes the gray matter in our brains and it changes our feelings of interpersonal relationships. And if you can't stop using it, that's when you need to be concerned that you've reached the level of addiction. So what is the impact of distractions on business? 28%, this researcher says, of a worker's day is now filled with interruptions and the recovery time, that switch cost, needed to get back in the flow. And 42% of workers say that they're extending their work days in order to avoid distractions. In fact, I remember when I used to work in corporate America, I would spend so much of my day in meetings and in taking requests from people that I never had time to actually get to fulfilling those requests. I did a lot of research, and the research took a lot of concentrated thought and attention. It was an executive function task. I needed to be able to filter out irrelevancy. I needed to be able to think critically about what I was reading and make connections among the different research studies. And I couldn't do that when I kept getting my phone ringing. And this was before cell phones even. I couldn't do that when people kept coming by and knocking on my cubicle or office door and saying, hey, do you have a minute? I'm like, well, no and yes, because I have to be polite to my coworkers. So what I would do in those situations is I would take requests all day and then I would start my research at 5 p.m. when everybody else went home. And I would start doing the critical thinking tasks at the end of the day when I should have also been going home. That was before I had kids. If I were in that same environment now, I couldn't have just extended my workday. I would have had to leave, and there would have had to be different rules of engagement throughout the day. Maybe that would have been better for me at that time anyway, to have those different rules of engagement anyway for my own health and to not have extended my workday like I did. So businesses are losing a lot of money annually on lack of job performance and lack of creativity as a result of distractions. If you've been following me on social media for the past couple weeks, I've been putting out little tidbits of information that we're going to be in this presentation today. I wrote one of the tidbits of information that I shared is how much businesses, U.S. companies, are losing annually as a result of distractedness in the workplace. Do you have a guess? $650 billion with a B dollars. $650 billion. A lot of countries are not that big. We're losing a huge, huge, huge amount of our gross domestic product, our GDP, on distractedness in the workplace. So what can be done, short of being rude to my coworkers? If you can't read this, I'll read it for you. Maybe I haven't made myself clear enough. I really don't want to be disturbed today with barbed wire and signage. What could I have done to tell my coworkers, look, I really need to concentrate. This is my work time. I want to go home at 5 o'clock just like you do. What could I have done? And part of it is arranging my workday differently. I've got some research on that. What can you do? How are people coping with distractions in the office environment? 43% are turning off their phones. That's a good thing to do. When I was preparing this presentation, in fact, it was kind of ironic because here I am preparing a presentation on focus. I got more phone calls on my home phone, on my work phone, on my cell phone than I ever do. They were just coming in. Notifications popping up on my computer. I actually walked my talk. I turned off my phone, my landline. I turned off my cell phone. I shut down Outlook, and I turned off notifications. I got so much done in one day, I cannot tell you. It was like a week's worth of work in one day. Now, people were a little annoyed with me when I turned on my phone at the end of the day. And I thought, okay, what I should have done is I should have made distraction breaks. I should have said, I'm going to work really intensely for 2 or 3 hours and then take a distraction break and check in again. Part of the issue is we've gotten so accustomed in our world to having an immediate response. People expect to send a text and to receive a text back within a minute or two. It's not necessarily a reasonable expectation, but people do this. So that's one thing people are doing. They're turning off their phones. 30% are using music, meditation, or other relaxation techniques, which is good, but it's a coping technique. It's how to release the stress and anxiety, like I talk about in that presentation, rather than build our focus muscles. Both are necessary, I believe. 26% are filling times with simple tasks that don't involve as much focus. That's going to impact the gray matter of our brains and our development. And 70% believe that training could help them learn to focus, but 66% of them haven't spoken to their managers about doing this. There's really a need in soft skills training, the stress and anxiety release, the ability to focus. How do we get better at doing those tasks?